Hi, I'm Leslie with Art Insights Animation and Film Art Gallery and Art Insights Magazine, and thank you for watching because we have with us today Andreas Deja, who is pretty much the very, very top of all the animators who have been working at Disney in the last, gosh, 20 years I'd say.
30.
30 for you, but I'm saying, like, you know, you really have created some of the most famous characters, you know, starting with like, when did you do your first really, you know?
The first big breakthrough probably had to be Roger Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the 4 supervising animators on that.
Okay, so as a supervising animator, are you creating characters, or are you helping everyone else pull together the look of the movie?
Well, you have a team. I mean, you animate the main character, in that case Roger Rabbit. I also did some of the Disney cameos, the Fantasia characters that show up there.
That's exciting.
And some of the classic characters, Mickey, Donald, and so forth. So we had 4 guys who really did the bulk of the footage, and then we had a whole team of other animators. And in this case, because it was done in London, we had people from France, from Canada, from Spain, Germany, Italy, so it was really a fun group.
Beyond that, though, it had to be really difficult to pull together all of the aesthetic design styles of all of the different characters into one cohesive look, because nothing had been done like that in a really long time.
Well, that kind of a mix between live action and animation was new, you know, where the character really cast shadows over each other, you know. Bob Hoskins would actually cause a shadow holding his hand over Roger's arm,
right,
and vice versa. That was new, because you look at Mary Poppins, and as brilliant as that works, but it's pretty flat. The drawings are cells, they're flat colors. In this case, once they walk into the real world, then they do have shadows and highlights and seem even more real. But we try to hook up to the Hollywood characters of the late 30s, early 40s. And there was that one question I remember, so what are the penguins doing there? They're not from the late 30s, early 40s, they're from the 60s, it's Mary Poppins. And then somebody, I forgot who it was, maybe Zemeckis or somebody had the bright answer, says, well, they had jobs before.
Yeah, they were a little older by the time they were in
Mary Poppins gig came after.
Oh, they're staying at the actor's home.
Exactly.
Yeah, the little Toontown actor's home. Jessica Rabbit is styled after all of those bombshells back then. So, what was the most challenging part of animating Roger Rabbit, would you say?
He was, in terms of animation, he was actually fairly easy, because you can go so wild with him. You don't have to be careful. It's not a princess or a prince where every line in the face just totally matters, you know. And if you draw that eye over just a little bit, you know, the character will end up looking like E.T. With Roger Rabbit, it just doesn't matter. He's got big, bulgy eyes, you know. He's got these cartoon hands. You can squash and stretch them as much as you want. So that was fun, and that was not that difficult. What was hard is blending it with live action, putting it into that live action footage. So
and not making it look so desperate between the two, so
yeah,
far removed
it had to
from each other.
match, you know, which means all the animated scene had to be on ones, and that means 24 drawings per second rather than 12.
Right.
Because in animation, sometimes when we have characters just talking and acting, we can actually photograph each drawing twice and bring it down to 12 drawings per second. But because with the live action, and life is on ones, the characters all had to be on ones too, so it just added to the workload.
I'm sure it made it interesting though, since Roger was so squashy, stretchy, to go in 24, you could do a lot more with him.
Yeah, you can, and you needed to. I mean, he was that kind of a character who was surreal, who could do anything. He could stretch out his arm, and it ended up like 12 feet, you know, in that way. I mean, you could do all that stuff with him. There were some moments and some scenes that required a little pathos. You know, there was, you know, when he was frustrated over Jessica's doings,
potential infidelity.
Exactly, you know. So there was some pathos in there. I had one scene that I messed up, and maybe viewers can find which one it is. Well, I'm going to tell you anyway. It's I had this big little sequence where Bob Hoskins comes back into his office, and he pulls the bed down, and Roger is in the bed already.
Right.
There's this big take, they scream at each other.
Right.
And then you have that long scene where Hoskins is standing on the left side of the screen, Roger on the right, and they argue back and forth, and the camera goes in ever so slowly. Roger jumps on the bed, and they keep arguing, right? And that bed sheet on that bed was complete white, so I had nothing to register Roger's feet to, and the camera was moving in, so the feet and the character had to grow slowly. Had they had a blanket there with stripes or a pattern, then you could base it on that and plant the feet on that pattern. There was nothing there, you know. So I talked to Richard Williams. I remember I said, I can't figure this out. This is not going to work, you know. And he said, well, the feet are going to be an issue in this scene, but maybe you don't have to have them stand still, and you see the mistakes maybe coming up. Maybe have him do these little steps.
I was just thinking, I remember that, yeah.
And add, so that's why he's doing this little dance almost for no reason.
Right.
You know, but it was just
solving
that
a problem.
scene. Yeah,
and
exactly.
Thank goodness for his personality, because it worked.
And the other thing in that scene also that happened, these puppeteers that we had who would hold these mechanical arms, you know, that they were holding a live-action glass that we had to draw over. They were getting sometimes a little bit too involved with their mechanics. And I remember at one point, Roger Rabbit was supposed to lean against that bed as he's talking to Hoskins.
Oh, yes.
And there's like a little suction happening on the bed where his hands would go. It's not really necessary because his hands are not that heavy that it would cause the bed to bend. But it was there, and I missed it.
Oh.
I missed it. I was so involved in the acting and what he was doing. And now when you look at the scene, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these 2 points in the bed just go zzz, and hold there for a few seconds and then come back because I'd forgotten about it.
Do you notice things like that, sort of like most artists, where you
Oh,
look
yeah.
back on something and you think, and then you can barely look at it because you think,
We see our
it's not.
mistakes all the time.
Mhm.
And we're not
It's
the
there
only,
forever.
we're not the only ones. Even the old guys had that kind of a curse with them. I remember years and years ago, I went to the Animation Research Library. It was called the Morgue,
Right.
when it was on the main lot. And there was Frank Thomas looking at a Captain Hook scene. And I said, Frank, what are you doing here? He said, well, I don't know, that scene, it always bothered me, and I want to check out what is wrong with it and how I would change it now. And I said, let it go, you know, it's been decades, you
Yeah.
know, but it still bothered him.
1953, isn't it?
It still bothered him in the early 80s, you know, so.
So, and speaking of that, you really you very much respect, love, and admire the old guard and the 9 Old Men, and you've done a lot of research. You're kind of like a resident expert there when you were at Disney. You know all about those guys and met a lot of them.
Well,
and
that was the bonus, you know, when I started at the studio. The good news was I had a job at Disney. Wow, who
Yeah.
can say that? You had a job at Disney. The bad news is the old guys had just left. I just missed them. I mean, Eric Larson was the one who hired me, and he was heading up the training program. So I kind of worked with him in a sort of a training way, or he was training me. But I didn't really work with any one of them on a movie, and it really bugged me. So then I thought about it, and I thought, well, but they're all still in town. They're all around.
Right.
There was Milt Kahl who had moved to San Francisco. That's not too far. I can go there once a year and hang out with him and polish his shoes, you know, and
Or whatever.
And do your thing, which I did. And Mark Davis was living not too far away, Frank and Ollie. So I saw these guys all the time for 20 years.
You seek them out.
Yeah.
And did you, when you were puzzling over a particular character, did you go to them and ask them for their advice, or how did the relationships take shape with each of these famous, amazing old animators?
I mostly wanted to know how they did things, and I wanted to find out if they had trials and errors and things that they would do solutions and where they maybe went wrong as far as they were concerned. And they were just to make this whole thing called Disney animation, which looks so perfect and beautiful, just to make it human. The humans made this, you know, and there were plenty of problems, plenty of things that, like in casting, for example, Milt Kahl wanted to do Captain Hook so bad. He didn't get it, you know, because Walt said, no, you do Peter and Wendy, and Frank is going to do Captain Hook, and he was so upset with that. So casting sometimes
was getting the
an
straight
issue.
ones.
Yeah, because he drew so well. I mean,
Right.
Walt knew that Peter Pan had to be drawn just right.
That's a tricky character
Yeah.
because he's got a lot of, he's very an animated face, but still kind of
It still
has.
looks real.
Mhm.
So you have to have both in there. So you put people like Mark Davis and Milt Kahl in those characters, and then of course Frank and Ollie would do the broader ones. But you know, there had been some casting issues, about that kind of thing, and
It's like blondes wanting to be redheads.
something
Because
like
they always
that.
wanted to switch it around,
Mhm.
and like you getting a little bit typecast into villains because you did them so well. It's like a curse to be really good at what you do.
And it actually kept on going, this whole villains thing. Because when I was done with Scar, I remember they started on Hercules and they asked me to do Hades. And I said, you know what, you guys, it's going to be a great part, and he's going to get all the laughs and all that, but I think for myself, I need to do something different because you end up repeating yourself maybe and do the same expressions, the same
Especially
acting.
right after the last one.
Yeah, the
You
same
need a
acting
break.
patterns, and since we did have choices then, I ended up doing Hercules, and then by the time it came to Hunchback, again, they wanted me to do Frollo, and I said, what I really want to do is the Gypsy Girl, because that's something that I've never done.
Yeah.
And I had a certain idea of how I would move her around, like a young Sophia Loren, you know, very expressive and
Right.
Italian almost, yeah.
Right?
And they said, well, but Tony Fucili asked about her about 6 months ago, so she's given. So then I didn't end up working on the movie.
What were
And
you doing instead of
I
working?
went to France instead and
Uh-huh.
helped the French studio with our first short film that we did with them,
Right?
Mickey. So that was a fantastic experience too, you know. But yeah, I mean, you have to break that pattern once in a while and do something different. Not all animators think that way, though. I mean, Mark Ken is perfectly happy.
I was going to say,
doing
Mark
female
Ken always
characters.
wants the girls.
He loves
always,
it.
Always
He loves
to
it.
say
He's
if
good
you
at
could.
it.
Mhm.
He's fast at it, you know. So that's what he wants to do. But I feel like I want to just try new things, different things, you know. Like
and
this.
Ruben Aquino's like that too. He wants to do all different,
Yeah, I think
different types
I
of
think
characters.
As an animator, and you can, you know, because you use your drawings. I mean, obviously you can draw anything. Like this one here, Lilo, was something completely new for me.
Yes, she's your heroine. There you go. There's the
Yeah,
one you did.
yeah,
It was the
and-
heroine.
And I thought, and I looked at her first at the first drawings that Chris Sanders had done, and I thought, oh, she's going to be a little squishy, squashy, Freddie Moore type character, which she wasn't. You know, she would be handled maybe that way because everything's very round, you know, and broad and all that sometimes. But she was very subtle. She was probably the most subtle characters that I've done.
Yeah,
And she did a lot with little movement, with looks, you know, with just small things.
she was very, and her character was very interior, I think.
There
Well,
was
you
really
got
stuff going on,
Stitch. I mean,
yeah.
you kind of needed foil for Stitch.
Yeah.
So but that must have been really good challenge.